evening. It's very, very late, so you'll be glad to hear that I'm not going to speak for very long. I was going to speak for a long time, but now it'll be very brief. I'm very lucky that Holocaust denial has never crossed my mind, nor that of any in my family. We live nearby. We've lived in Sussex all our lives, and we've lived nearly all our lives near Eastbourne in Friston. And my sister may be known to many of you because she's called Dr. Joanna Shawcross, and she has worked in the NHS in Eastbourne all her life. I grew up thinking about the Holocaust because I grew up listening to records of my father's speeches at Nuremberg. My father was elected as an MP in the Labour landslide in 1945. He was the most senior lawyer in the in Parliament on the Labour side, and Attlee immediately made him Attorney General. As Attorney General, he was responsible for helping with the other allies, of course, setting up the structure of Nuremberg, of the trials. And extraordinarily, although the war only ended in May 1945, the Nuremberg trial of the major Nazi leaders was created and set up almost instantly, and the trial opened in November 1945. And of the major German war criminals, it ended in July 46. Astonishing. Nowadays, in The Hague, you have war crimes trials, so it's gone for years and years and years. Milosevic, the Yugoslav leader, actually died in the dock. But anyway, Nuremberg was an extraordinary achievement. It's sometimes denounced as victor's justice. I think myself that given the circumstances and given the appalling nature of German war crimes, particularly against the Jews and the Holocaust especially, it was actually a great success. I will not dwell further on that now, and all I would say is that with relationship to the phrase never again, we always have to be extraordinarily vigilant because anti-Semitism goes on and on and on and on. Only yesterday, 2 shopkeepers in North London were beaten up by an unknown, as far as we know, yet an unknown assailant. There's a report that 2021 was the worst year for anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic attacks throughout the world, the worst year in 10 years. The BBC is being investigated for the way in which it covered an anti-Semitic attack on young Jews celebrating Hanukkah in Oxford Street a month ago. Only 2 weeks ago, a British man, not a young man, a 45-year-old British man from Blackburn, attacked a synagogue in Texas and held the worshippers hostage until he was overcome and shot by the police. It goes on and on and on. There's always this terrible current of anti-Semitism. And I want to just leave you with this thought, this vision of my father, which affected my childhood enormously, because I used to listen to his speeches on old 78 RPM gramophone records. Some of you are as old as I am and will remember 78s. They're very fragile, rather wonderful. And now you can see it on YouTube. And this is a speech he made, and recounting horrific scenes in the first person. And I, for a very long time in my childhood, could not understand why my father, or how my father, could ever have seen such atrocious scenes of Jews being murdered by Nazi stormtroopers. Only later did I understand that he was quoting from the testimony of a German hero called Hermann Graeber, a Christian, not a Nazi, who did a lot in Ukraine to rescue Jews, and he was a sort of mini Schindler. And I got to know his family subsequently. I made a program for the BBC, which went out in September this year, called Nuremberg Remembered, which is a rather beautiful program, not to me, thanks to the producer of the BBC, who did a wonderful job. Anyway, I'd like you to just hear these few words from my father in his closing speech at Nuremberg in July 1946, when he goes from the general horrific war crimes of the Nazi regime very much to the particular, in the words of the testimony of this brave German Christian called Hermann Graeber.
Let Graeber speak again of Dubno. The people who had got off the trucks, men, women and children of all ages, had to undress upon the orders of an SS man who carried a riding or dog whip. They had to put down their clothes in fixed places, sorted according to shoes, top clothing and underclothing. I saw a heap of shoes of about 800 to 1,000 pairs. Great piles of underlinen and clothing. Without screaming or weeping, these people undressed, stood around in family groups, kissed each other, said farewells, and waited for a sign from another SS man who stood near the pit, also with a whip in his hand. During the 15 minutes that I stood near, I heard no complaint or plea for mercy. I watched a family of about 8 persons, a man and a woman, both about 50, with their children of about 1, 8, and 10, and 2 grown-up daughters of about 20 or 24. An old woman with snow-white hair was holding the 1-year-old child in her arms and singing to it and tickling it. The child was cooing with delight. The couple were looking on with tears in their eyes. The father was holding the hand of a boy about 10 years old and speaking to him softly. The boy was fighting his tears. The father pointed to the sky, stroked his head, and seemed to explain something to the boy. At that moment, the SS man at the pit shouted something to his comrade. The latter counted off about 20 persons and instructed them to go behind the earth mound. Among them was the family, which I have mentioned. I well remember a girl, slim and with black hair, who, as she passed close to me, pointed to herself and said, 23. I walked around the mound and found myself confronted by a tremendous grave. People were closely wedged together and lying on top of each other so that only their heads were visible. Nearly all had blood running over their shoulders from their heads. Some of the people shot were still moving. Some were lifting their arms and turning their heads to show that they were still alive. I was surprised that I was not ordered away.
That, I should say, it was the reality of the Holocaust, which can never be denied. Thank you so much.